I think this is recording, so hello YouTube, hello BookTube. This is Johnny. This is February the 19th, is a Tuesday night here in Southwest Michigan. It's 8:43 at night, and I was going to do a video tonight, and I was going to show like Monday reads, but I just watched a booktuber do the Nosey Librarian Tag, and she didn't tag anybody, but she said if anybody is watching this video, you're tagged to do this tag. Since I had, what I do, if I come across a tag in BookTube, I'll paste it into my online journal, Crooked Fingers, and I'll post the questions in there and I'll answer them, but I won't necessarily do a video on the tag. But since she said in that tag, if anybody's watching this tag, you're tagged, so I consider myself tagged. So I copied off what I had written last week, I think, on this tag, and the questions are the Nosey Librarian Tag questions. Question 1: what has been the most influential library in your life? Well, I put down, I mentioned in a recent video that when I was in high school in Richmond, California, that when I went to Richmond Public Library, which is the major library for the city of Richmond. But there was another library that was influential in my life, and it was the Pacific School of Religion Library in Berkeley, California. Now, why that library was influenced me is that many years ago, it was probably like in the early 1970s, I was a volunteer and on staff at the Richmond Rescue Mission. And I didn't have any money, but I would use libraries. And I would take a bus to Berkeley on my days off from the rescue mission, and I would use the libraries there in Berkeley, the university libraries. But for some reason, I started going to Pacific School of Religion Library. And I would go there and I would look at their books. And I went there because I had been reading Calvinistic literature, the 17th century English Puritans. And I went to this library. Well, I thought it was a seminary, so I figured, well, they'd have Christian books. So I went to this library in Berkeley, and Pacific School of Religion is not really Christian anymore. It's pretty bad. But now remember, this is almost 45 years ago. But anyway, the point is, this seminary had a library, and I thought, well, it must have Christian books. Well, in this library, they had 17th century, 16th century leather-bound editions of the English Puritan writings. And I would go there on my days off. I couldn't check these books out, but I could sit there in the library and I would read them. So that's got me into 17th century English Puritanism, was this library. And from there I got into the Reformed faith and got into Calvinism. Okay, that's a long question. Question 2, honest assessment. What will the title of your biography? I thought about this. I've shown you that I wrote many years ago, back in the 80s, I wrote down every single memory that I can remember up until the birth of our first child. And I called it the Dharma Bums. No, the Puritan Bums. A Puritan Bum, that's what I called it. But I wrote here the drifting on a death flow, or the drifter. So because when I write in my diaries in the morning, the first thing I say, it is 7:30 in the morning in the death flow. Now sometimes I'll say it is 7:30 a.m. in the plan of God, It is 7:30 a.m. in the cosmic flow of the eternal now, things like that. But if I was to title my biography, I wrote down The Drifter, drifting on a death flow. Question 3, the story from your life that you most hope your librarian never finds out. Well, now, when I was really young, before I was married, before I left California, I lived a very wild, riotous life. So I'm not ashamed of my youth because I was very rebellious. Now, outwardly, I looked like a very shy, introverted, quiet person. But I broke every 10 Commandments there was when I was young. And so I wouldn't want my youth to be recorded in detail because I broke every 10 Commandments. Question 4, what is your favorite word? Well, my favorite word is suppose. I use that word a lot, suppose. Question 3, 3 weird things which you are afraid and which you would prefer not to die. Well, I'm afraid of many things. I'm afraid of, I don't know if they're weird things. Because people have these kinds of fears. I'm fearful of flying in airplanes. I'm fearful. I can't go through car washes. I can't go into any enclosed spaces like a car wash. I just can't do it. And I can't go over bridges. I mean, if we go over, I can't go over a bridge. I mean, it just freaks me out going out. Like, you're going over like the Mississippi River, or you're going over any kind of span bridge over a canyon. I just can't do it. And I don't want to die in an American Civil War. I know that eventually in America we're going to break out in Civil War. And I don't want to die on the streets of Holland, Michigan, being shot down by a Republican, conservative, white, Christian fanatic who is chanting, "Make America Great." Question 6, your favorite book as a grade schooler. Well, I'm going to be honest to you. When I was growing up as a grade schooler, my mother dated a lot of guys. And I remember when I was in grade school, my mother, who had this boyfriend, we went over his house and he had Playboy magazines everywhere. So I put down my favorite book was the Playboy magazine. Question 7, what have your interactions with the police been like? Well, I won't go into it. I've had several kinds of encounters with police, but I was remembering tonight, I remember when I was in high school, every summer, like in 11th and 12th grade, I would go hitchhiking up in California and Oregon. I would hitchhike up and down the coast and sleep on the beach and smoke marijuana and hang out with hippies. And one time I was hiking through Oregon. I was going up to Vancouver, Canada. And I didn't realize that it was not legal to hitchhike. So I was stopped by a policeman and gotten a ticket. I had to go into town, pay the ticket, and I had to take a bus up into Seattle, Washington. So I was stopped by the police when I was I think I was in the 12th grade or 11th grade. So your all-time favorite book cover. Well, I put down the King James Bible. I like this book cover of just a plain leather-bound King James Bible with the Holy Bible on it. That's my favorite book cover. Question 9, how many places have you lived? Well, I was born in Oakland, California. And then my mother moved out to the East Coast and we lived in Washington, D.C. when I was little, and then we lived in Maryland. And then my mother got married, and there was my brother and myself. We didn't have fathers. Well, we were born out of wedlock, and my stepfather was from Norfolk, Virginia. He was in the Navy. And we lived in Norfolk, Virginia. And then when she divorced him, my mother had a nervous breakdown, and my brother and I, we lived with our aunt and uncle who were alcoholics in a small town, Coos Bay, Oregon. Then my mother got remarried to another guy back in Virginia, flew back to Virginia. We were living in Blackwater County Courthouse, Virginia. Then my stepfather, got transferred to Los Angeles. So we moved to Los Angeles, and right after that, my mother kicked my stepfather out and divorced him. So we lived in Los Angeles until my mother was killed in an auto wreck. And then when my mother was killed, I went back to live with my aunt, who is now living in San Pablo, California. And I lived in San Pablo and Richmond, California, up until I left to go to Bible college, which I left and lived in Michigan, where I met Carol. And after Bible college, we moved to Mississippi to do my internship. And then after we did our internship, we moved to Texas. And after we moved to Texas, we lived there for 5 years, and then we moved back to Michigan, and now we live in Holland. So I have lived in California, Maryland, Washington, Virginia, Oregon, Texas, Michigan, and Mississippi. And it says here, question 10, tag 11 booktubers. Well, anybody who's watching this booktube tag, the Nosey Librarian tag, you're tagged. So that's it. So I hope you are having a good week. Thank you for the new subscribers. And until next time, bye.